Finding balance, time, cost, and quality in business systems. Join John Tonkin as we delve into the critical interplay between time, cost, and quality in business systems and learn how to use these factors to influence profitability and the decision-making process, while also discovering strategies for maintaining balance to build efficient and sustainable businesses. I'm your co-host, Anthony Pearl, and this is the Systems from the Box podcast. Let's start unpacking.
John, I wanted to start a discussion here with you about something that you've touched on in previous episodes, time, cost, and quality, because I think these are three very important areas that people need to understand in order to make systems an integral part of the business for the right reasons.
Yep. They are interactive at all times. And this is where a little bit of careful thinking comes into it, because it's easier to think we want to make the cheapest thing we can in the shortest possible time and get it out there, and we can sell, if we can sell 10 of these by lunchtime sort of thing, we'll make a lot of money. Well, it's a lovely way to think, but it's a very immature way to think, and it's not realistic it never has been. And so it's always going to be coming down to say, wait a second, what is the minimum quality that the client will accept? And then that will also match the cost they have to pay and the time they have to wait. So it's always going to be those things. What is the best quality I can get if I'm the client? I'm buying from you. What's the best quality I can get at the cost I'm prepared to pay for the time I'm prepared to wait? And so it's really got to come down to those things that we're looking at in anything we're doing in systems. Because if systems are focused on speed, there's a chance that they will not be looking at quality or cost. If they're focused on cost, they may not be looking deeply enough at quality or time, etc. And if they're focused only on quality, it may be great. We can build a Rolls Royce, but wait a sec, we're only charging them Volkswagen prices. So we've got to make sure that we've got everything matched. So that getting the mix right there, I talked about this with a client. This goes back probably 15 years. I had a client and we talked about time, cost, quality, and it was really quite a major part of his understanding, his little launch into the systems world, if you like. And in the end, he had a little cardboard sheet that just wrote time, cost, quality on it, and he sticky taped it up on the wall next to his desk. And anytime anyone would come in to him and say, I'll call him Bill, we can improve the time on this, he would not answer them. He'd just tap that sheet, often without even looking at it, just tap that time, cost, quality thing. In other words, he's waiting for them to say, we can do this quicker, and here is how it will impact quality. Here is how it will impact cost. Or if they came in and said, we believe we can make a better version of this, tap, tap, tap. What does it do in terms of time and cost? And for me, understanding that's where the economics of profitability comes in. We talk about making a profit. You can make a profit, but might make it unethically. You might make a profit without actually having longevity there. You might make a profit for a short while, then everything starts to fail. So by looking at it and thinking about time, cost, quality, this is where you have the opportunity to build something that will deliver quality over time and, build that reputation for quality and cost and time management. That means that you've got a winner. And I think it's a critical thing, and so many people do not really understand how they work together. They'll just be looking at it in terms of, can I make it cheaper? Oh, yes, I can. Well, I'm going to do that, rather than I'm going to make it cheaper, but no one will buy it, or no, it won't work, or whatever, all of those. So it's such a critical concept to have, that interaction between time and cost and quality.
It's so important the way you phrase that, because I can see how people think of it in terms of the end result of a product or a service that they're delivering. But ultimately, it's the systems that deliver that product or service in the end that is so super critical to making those decisions. And often, there's this battle of, how do I set the price for a particular product or service that you're selling? And those other things, as you say, have to be working together in order for that to get the result that you want, because otherwise you find either you're compromising either in terms of the quality that you're delivering, or you're compromising in terms of the profitability.
Yep. It's the big thing that people talk about all the time. I was listening to a radio show yesterday, a radio interview yesterday afternoon, and the fellow was saying how, the cost of living is going up more. We've just done this. We thought we'd got our pricing right. And then the rent went up. The rent in the factory went up, or the rent in the premises wherever he was went up. And all of a sudden now that went up by 40%. And so he then said, I had no excuse but to put the price up. I had to put that. But of course, that then started to impact on our customers, people not buying from him. And it's this thing you've always got as a business owner where you're trying to match the time cost quality from your side against what the client is prepared to pay or prepared to accept in terms of time cost and quality. And it's a very hard thing to do. And sometimes it's a matter of communication between those. It's not quite a matter of opening up at your books and saying, look, I'm only making this much, because it makes you sound like a failure. But there has to be something where you can look at something in realistic terms that lets you do that. When I'm saying this, I'm thinking in the back of my mind of a ploy used by Ricardo Semler way back now, many years ago. You would have heard of him, the book Maverick. And in that, he was talking about how the workers in his factory, in his tractor factory, were saying, we want to be paid more money. We want this. And he would try to give them something and then would try and say, well, I can't do any more than that. They always assumed that he had lots of money in his back pocket or in the safe in the office or something like that, that he could be paying them, but wasn't. In the end, what he said was, all right, I tell you what, I will let you have more money if you can show me how we can make it. And so he went and invited them in, and they went through at the desk and so on at the table and tried to work out what they could do so that they could earn more money and still make a product that people would buy. And it was an eye-opener. It really was for them as much as for him, insofar as they were prepared to put the effort in to try and make it. And it got rid of all that angst and bother between the boss at one level and the workers at the other level, because they realized, well, he isn't trying to hide anything. It is a challenge trying to make money. It isn't just a matter of giving more money away to people in the team. It's a matter of actually having to work hard to work out how we can get that balance between time, cost, and quality. Such a huge thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's that balance is so important, because an earlier scenario that you talked about where you had to, give everyone a pay rise, and certainly if it's a significant one, I think you talked about 40%. The problem really is that unless you improve your systems, unless you've got a way of improving things, at the end of the day, you're simply saying, well, the price has risen just because everything else has risen. So you're just in this, and that's where the economies get into trouble, really, because you've got this inflationary cycle that just doesn't end.
Yeah.
So you have to be looking in business as well about how you improve and do things differently, because prices will rise around you. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world where we see prices drop.
That's right. And if they do drop, there's often a bad reason for it. So the example you've just used there brings to mind something I did with a client just recently. We realize in our business that we have to make more money. We have to charge more money from the client. But sometimes we don't have to charge more money from the client. Sometimes we have to find a way of capturing that money from within the business. And I don't mean robbing Peter to pay Paul, that sort of approach. What I mean is sometimes there is money that we are spending in the business, which we are spending badly. And I'm thinking of a business, and I won't go anywhere near indicating who it is, obviously, but this business had a process where every week they needed to send out a schedule to clients saying, here's what's happening next week. And here it is. And they were producing that schedule in a very manual way. They were getting a CSV download from the software they used, and they were then transferring one by one. This is for Bill, so there's Bill's schedule. Oh, here's another one for Bill, put it on Bill's schedule. And, oh, here is another one for Bill, put it on the schedule. And then they would go through and look at the next person. And they were doing this every week. And it would take 3.5 to 4 hours every week to prepare and email this schedule. Now, we created a tool for them where all they need to do now is to download that CSV file and paste it into the first page, first tab of a spreadsheet, and press one button. And that does everything. It sorts them, categorizes everything, sorts it by all the different clients, and then emails it out to them all in the company's colors and looking smart and looking very professional, way more professional than it looked beforehand, way more real. So that was where we would have, if we think about it and just use a parallel in that business and say, we would have had to charge more to the client to get the result they were getting. Whereas now what we've done is, no, we didn't have to charge more to the client. We earned more by doing something more efficiently within the business. So by doing that, now we think about that was 3.5 to 4 hours per week. 3.5 to 4 hours is anything up to 200, say 175 to 200 hours a year. And that is around about 4 to 5 weeks every year that they, of one person's salary, that they pulled back. So that's a significant amount. Like, that's over a month. Like, think about it, and you could be pulling back that much in a month in one thing, potentially doing that. But that means now they didn't have to increase the pricing for their clients and were able to maintain the profitability in the business. Whereas there are other times where obviously we see it all the time where the business owner will pull back the profit and do that side of it. At the same time, they're not always looking for how they can make the money from efficiencies within the business through better systems, through better tracking, through better waste management, through better purchasing practice, through better procurement practice, and so on. All the little things that could be, that 1% here, 1% there, from the English rowing team, make the boat go faster and so on. All of those little things that we hear about, which would be fantastic if we could put them into practice, but it isn't something that always comes straight to mind. Usually when there's a problem, people man particularly, will try to solve the problem, and solving the problem isn't always going to be done the right way. So a little bit of thinking first.
Hey, John, I just want to take a break from the main part of the podcast for a moment so you can tell us a little bit more about Brain in a Box.
So Brain in a Box the idea started when I was working in corporate. I was working in a couple of major companies, internationals, and I decided that when I went out and started my first business in 2000, that it was going to use the same principles as I had done in corporate world to capture systems and to make them accessible to the team. But I thought, I've got to be able to do this for small business, small to medium business, and that's what we focus on. So we work with the business owner, with the team, to capture what the business does, and then to minimize the risk by going through and looking at all the risks that we have to manage, make sure we capture those and manage them effectively, and also to achieve the benefit. And then we make all that. That's just effectively what it is.
Yeah, and I think fresh perspective is also everything as well, whether it's an external perspective or, walking away from it for a period of time to try and view things differently. And we've all had that, right, where we're putting some kind of puzzle together, whether it's a literal puzzle or whether it's something within the business. And for the life of you get so close to it and you just can't sort the wood from the trees. And then suddenly you go, right, that's it. I'm walking away, whether it's, a day or just a night's sleep. And you wake up and you go, oh, what if we tried it this way? And suddenly, things just fall into place in a completely different way. And I think that's such an important thing to consider as well, is perspective in how you approach these things is so important.
Yeah, the old swamps and alligators story, isn't it? And if there are some people who are so deep into the problems and the issues that they're facing that they're not considering, why don't I just pull back a little bit and see if there's a way of doing something about this? Because typically we do this at a personal level when there's a problem, financial problem or a health problem or a matching, getting to Jenny's concert on Friday night problem, all the different things that are there. And we get focused on the problem, and then we focus on the one thing we can't do. And we almost think that means we can't do anything. And often it's a matter of take away everything, step back, as you say, maybe go for a walk around the block, have an ice bath, do something, but do something that takes your mind, resets it in effect, and takes it away, because often it's going to be something where you think, well, I couldn't do that thing and get the right result. Changing my thinking, I now realize there's a totally different approach that wouldn't have thought of just by persevering with that one dogged approach that I was using before, that one idea that was going to go nowhere.
I want to ask you as well, on the back of all of this, how important is both the times that you go back to reviewing things, because there are efficiencies to be created, and what is possible today, or what is not possible today, I should say, may be possible tomorrow. And there are constant reviews and things that you have to consider, isn't it, in part of this, as part of
Yeah.
this process. It's not something you just lock in and say, okay, we're going to do this exercise once and we can forget about doing it again for a few years. You need some consistency in how you approach this.
Yeah. And it's a vital thing to be aware of as well, that no one can afford to just sort of tick something off and say, and it's going to be fine for a few years. It's a horrible approach. This is where good practice comes into play. This is why you have things like ISO 9001 and all those different ones, all the different standards there. A lot of people get very caught up with them and say, oh, they're horrible. They make you do all these things. Well, no, they don't actually make you do anything. But what they are doing is to say a good, effective business would do this. A good, effective business would be focused on what its clients are saying. A good, effective business will be looking at where it gets its suppliers from and who manufactures all the sub-assemblies or whatever they have in their business and so on. So a lot of it is actually just thinking about it and planning the business out, planning out everything so that you can think of all those component parts in there and make sure that nothing is going to be just sort of taken for granted. And, you wake up and you find out that you are in the swamp and all those alligators are getting closer.
Let's hope not. Let's hope you don't wake up that way and do that, because you do have to schedule this thing in on a regular basis. And you do have to look at technology consistently, but not be, I guess, overwhelmed by the need to do that almost on a daily basis, because you can fall into that pattern at the moment. There is so much technology around, and we all attend conferences and things like that where suddenly there's this latest and greatest is displayed, and you feel this kind of burning need to jump on board and do that. But the business has to be ready for it as well.
Yeah.
And just because it's available today doesn't mean you should jump on it today either.
Yeah. I think there are two things that come out. And if I pull back at the point, I don't think I quite answered it on the last one. There was about that sort of keeping that regular monitoring and regular review of everything that's happening. You can look at some things and say, we need to look at this on a particular audit schedule. So we're going to look at it every 3 months. And for some things that might be fine, particularly things like the use of machinery where the machine is used all the time and wears out, and you can predict where it's going to wear out. And that's going to be a handy thing to look at in 3 months or whenever you think it might be worthy of a next check. But pardon me, there will be some things where it's not so much looking at it in terms of reviewing it by time or even reviewing it by number of cycles. Sometimes it's reviewing the signs that we know would indicate failure. So this is the sort of thing that, if we go right back to looking at metal fatigue and things that were, related to aircraft, early commercial aircraft flight, where they weren't aware of metal fatigue. And so they weren't expecting to find it. So they weren't looking for it. But they might well have been looking at this machine or this engine in that aircraft every, 1,000 hours or 50 hours or whatever it might have been, 100 hours, I don't know. But they weren't looking for the signs. So often it's also a matter of reading the signs, reading the tea leaves almost, hope not, reading the signs that say there is something that needs attention in our business. And it may come from your team. It may come from your clients giving that feedback. It may come from changes in orders. It could come from a whole pile of things, but something where you realize, you know what, we really need to check that because something's telling me that we need to look at that. So you've got scheduled times, you've got cycled times, scheduled by cycle or time period. And then you've also got looking at the signals that would indicate a failure. And that's another reason why, again, when we work on business systems with a client, the big focus is on risks and benefits. Everything in business is risk and benefit. But we record the risks and we record the benefits. And the good thing about recording the risks is that at some stage we could review that and go through a process and say, you know what, that's actually starting to happen now. That risk is starting to come true because we've taken our eye off the ball a bit, or something's changed, and it's a good indicator that we need to get back in there and fix it, examine it, and work out how to overcome the problems we've found.
A lot to unpack there, and something we're going to look into in future episodes for sure.
I hope so, because it is such, we tend to make everything simple. We tend to think if it's not simple, it can't be true. But not everything in business is simple. If you think about, the simple things like making bread. I was watching a bread program last night, and there was somebody showing this way that you don't have to knead the bread, but you can make these beautiful baguettes. And I thought, oh, that looks really cool. Yeah, pretty basic recipe. And it isn't so much that there's a lot of kneading and, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing it for hours, but it was a matter of doing something, a little rigmarole for a few minutes and then leaving it for 30 minutes. And then doing that little rigmarole again and then leaving it for another 30 minutes. And then doing something else and leaving it for 2 hours. So these are other interferers, if you like, with what our desired process is. We don't want to do that. We want to sort of do something and then wait once, do something once, wait once, have bread once. Whereas, no, if you want to make this particular bread as per that, and as per most main means of making bread naturally, you really want to have that, do it, wait, do it, wait, do it, wait, etc., to let everything develop. Oh, I loved bread though.
Before you go, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're tuned to. Thank you for listening to the Systems from the Box podcast featuring John Tonkin from Brain in a Box. Details on how to contact John and his team are in the show notes, along with other valuable links you don't want to miss. This podcast is produced by Podcast Done For You. I'm Anthony Pearl. We look forward to your company on the next episode.